Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dante Fortson here with Destroyed for Lack of Knowledge, Politics in the Black Community. This is going to be an interesting one. I know some people are going to be very upset. Some people are going to be very enlightened. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to wake up. Who knows? I just know this. Everybody's going to have some kind of reaction to what I'm going to say today. So before we get to that, you guys should check out HebrewSphere.com. It is a place for us to converse and share ideas and exchange information and not have to worry about being banned from other social media platforms because we're being too pro-black or too truthful. It's a different vibe there. Just an FYI, honestly, I've been spending way more time on Hebrew Sphere than I have on Facebook, and the conversations are just different. It's good to look up and see pictures of black people or see conversations started by black people about stuff that's important to us, specifically in the Israelite community. Shout out to everybody who's given tons of suggestions, that some of which have already been implemented to make the community better. Shout out to the people who are suggesting different kind of forums and groups that we can add to make the community better. So if you guys have not signed up yet, it's free. Just go to HebrewSphere.com. And as of just a few minutes ago, actually, I took this screenshot. We have hit 1,000 users on the site. So it is growing pretty fast. I just announced it last Wednesday, I believe it was. So, yesterday was a week. So yeah, it's growing pretty fast, and 1,000 users. So shout out to everybody who has signed up so far. Please keep spreading the word and sharing with people that we do have a platform where we can be who we are, and we don't have to worry about being banned or put in digital jail for doing that. If anybody comes there that isn't us, they have to respect the house. Simple as that. So go to HebrewSphere.com, sign up for free, and join in on all the discussions going on. All right, for those of you who want to support Hebrew Sphere or BlackHistoryInTheBible.com or these YouTube videos, you can do so at patreon.com/Dante Fortson. If you want to support via Cash App, you can do that with hashtag BHITB. The PayPal link is in the description. And of course, you can use Super Chat by clicking the S in the chat box while the premiere is live. And for those of you who don't have it to support, a share and a prayer are always appreciated. All right, today's video, lesson, presentation, whatever you want to call it, it's not a Bible study, but it is brought to you by Undeniable, full color evidence of black Israelites in the Bible. If you just want the evidence, you don't want to argue with people, just show them the evidence, this is the book you need to grab. If you want the history and you want to know what's going on, check out The Black Hebrew Awakening, The Final 400 Years of Slaves in America. Both of those can be found on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com if you want paperback copies. If you want digital copies, you can find them on just about every digital reading platform out there, including Apple Books, Google Play Books, and Kindle. All right, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. If you have not done so already, make sure you click the subscribe button if you have not done so already. And if you are subscribed, make sure you click the notification bell and then click all notifications so you don't miss any future updates. All right, so here we go. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Now, I find that to be very interesting as I look around at today's modern political climate. And the question is, how do you know if you're being controlled? I know a lot of people think that they think for themselves, but how do you know that you're thinking for yourself and somebody else isn't doing the thinking for you? That's just something to consider for a second. Because many people say, I make my own decisions. And yet when you listen to them talk, you hear talking points. And there's a reason people point out talking points, and people don't realize they're doing it. Now, sometimes talking points can't be avoided. It's a tactic. They'll throw that out there to avoid having conversation. They'll say, well, you're just using talking points, as if that somehow releases them from answering to those points. But anyway, talking points tend to be created in order to program people. And I'm going to show you what I mean as we go through this. How dare you not be black? How dare you be black and not vote Democrat? This is the mentality that many black Democrats have toward other black people that just refuse to vote Democrat. Why do we have to vote Democrat? But they can't understand the concept of a black person who is not plugged into the system, of a black person who not only does not want to vote Democrat, but also has something negative to say about the Democrat Party. It doesn't compute to them. And so what they've said recently, what they've started saying now, this is what I'm talking about, being programmed. If you're a black Democrat and right now you're thinking he must be a Russian bot, that's because you've been programmed to think that. He must be an agent. You've been programmed to think that. He must be a coon because he doesn't support the Democrat Party. You've been programmed to think that. He needs to be educated because he's uneducated. He needs to be reprogrammed or replugged into the matrix because you've been programmed to think that that's what we need. I must be paid by Trump, or other black people who do not support the Democrat Party must be paid by Trump. I wish Trump was paying me because right now I'm doing all this stuff for free. I'm saying what I'm saying for free. If Trump wants to pay me, please, please, please send me a check because this stuff is funny. I'm getting accused of it anyway. I might as well get paid for it. I must be COINTELPRO. Like, this is one I heard recently I thought was hilarious. COINTELPRO. Or I must be a Trump supporter. Just because somebody does not like Democrats does not mean they automatically support Trump. But me, I like to troll people, so sometimes I lean into it. Now, let's get back to being programmed, right? So all these are programmed responses. And if you don't think that they're programmed responses, just watch how often other black Democrats use it. Watch how often it gets said. You can be on somebody's friends list for years and you say something negative about Democrats, then all of a sudden their friends are asking, is he a bot? Is he a bot? I don't know. It's so funny to me. So how dare you be black and not vote Democrat? You've been programmed to think that if you're black, you have to support Democrat automatically, no matter what they do, no matter what they say. So are you doing the thinking for yourself or is somebody else thinking for you? So let's talk about another problem with the Democrats. Now, why am I going in on Democrats? I feel I should put that out there first before I continue. Why am I going in on Democrats? Because people ask me to. Simple as that. I talk about it all day, but people ask me to, clarify. Go in and clarify. Why is it that I go in on Democrats all the time and I always have something to say about Democrats? Well, my main problem with Democrats is that the majority of black voters vote Democrat. I think it's like 90% or so. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but the majority of black voters vote Democrat. So it makes sense. If I'm talking to the majority, I'm going to address the party that the majority are supporting. Now, black people tend to be able to see the problems with the Republican Party. So it doesn't make sense for me to go preach to the choir if the majority of black people already see what's wrong with the Republican Party. Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's talk about a blatantly false narrative. This mythological party switch that Democrats swear happened. Now, this thing never made sense to me ever. And here's why. The reason it never made sense is because some of the policies are still the same as they were before the party switch. The other reason, it doesn't make sense that Republicans, who then were, I wouldn't say they were pro-black, but they were more tolerant of black people and they did try to pass laws to help black people. Why would they suddenly go over to a racist party and become racist and support racist stuff? And then why would the racist Democrats suddenly go over and be Republicans and be like, all right, we're going to be racist over here now? It doesn't make sense. And so the racist Republicans are now the old racist Democrats, and the non-racist Republicans are now the old racist Democrats. I don't know. It's confusing. Why would they switch party names? Why? That doesn't even make sense. They're like, we're just going to call ourselves Democrats now. And they're like, all right, cool. We're going to call ourselves Republicans. And it doesn't make sense. So now this mythological party switch, there is a real story, but the problem is everybody overlooks what really happened. See, Democrats in general will tell you that, yeah, there was a party switch in the 60s or 70s because they never can pin down the exact year that this thing happened or the few years that this thing happened. Okay, so let's say the decades of the 60s and 70s, there was this mythological party switch that happened. But then on the flip side of that, they will also tell you that Republicans use Southern strategy to attract racist Democrats to the party so the Republicans could win the nomination or win the presidency, not the nomination, win the presidency. So now you're telling me that Republicans used Southern strategy to bring the Democrats over to the Republican Party so that they wouldn't lose the elections, and then they just became Democrats, because that would be a party switch, right? So then they just switched to become Democrats after they pulled the Democrats over. Wouldn't they still have lost if they became Democrats after they made all the Democrats become Republicans? Like, none of this stuff makes sense. And yet they try to sell us this as a realistic scenario. So either the party switched or the Republicans used Southern strategy to pull racist Democrats to the Republican Party. Now, it can't be both. It just doesn't make sense. It's not logical to believe both things happened. So, because none of this makes sense, and I'm a very analytical person, and you can ask anybody that knows me, I probably get on people's nerves because I catch little stuff in TV shows like how much food is missing from somebody's plate. Like on The Chi last week, Keisha had a plate full of food. They heard her laugh and then they came out immediately and then all her food was gone. Stuff like that bothers me. So now you have this ridiculous scenario, party switch, but Republicans pulled the Democrats over so the Republicans wouldn't lose, but then they became Democrats, so they lost anyway. Did the party switch or did Republicans use Southern strategy? That's the first question. Did all of the racist Democrats leave the Democrat Party? That's a huge question. Because if you go by the Southern strategy story, all the racist Democrats did not leave the Democrat Party. Some of the racist Democrats stayed, and some of the racist Democrats went over to the Republican Party. What influence did the remaining racist Democrats have on the future of the party? Another valid question, because if only some of the racists left and some of the racists stayed, it means those racists were still in the party having influence over policy. And if you guys know anything about segregation and Jim Crow, you would know that the Democrats were the ones that wanted to keep Jim Crow laws. They did not want black people to be treated equally. And yet somehow we have this notion that the party switched and the Democrats all of a sudden became the benevolent Republicans and the benevolent Republicans all of a sudden became racist Democrats. It does not make sense. Why would non-racist Republicans switch to a racist Democrat Party? That is what doesn't make sense. I can get if you use Southern strategy to say, all right, look, we're going to bring these racists over here so we can win. But the people who are not racist is not going to say, you know what, I'm going to go join that racist party over there. We're not racist, but I'm going to go join those racists because you're going to bring some of the racists over here. So I'm going to go join those racists over there. It just doesn't make sense. None of this stuff makes sense. Did Southern strategy result in two racist parties instead of just one? See, I feel like we missed the elephant in the room. If the Democrat Party was racist and the Republicans wanted to use Southern strategy to attract some of those racists into the to the Republican Party, and not all of the Democrats left, so you still have racists in the Democrat Party, and now you have some racist Democrats in the Republican Party. So now you have racist Democrats influencing both parties, not just one party. So what we actually end up with is Democrat and Democrat 2.0, or Democrat and Democrat Light, whichever one you want to call whichever one. You have two versions of the Democrat Party right now. One is extremely racist in public, and the other ones are smart enough to be racist behind closed doors so they can keep black support. So let's go on. So now let's talk about how illogical some black Democrats are when it comes to like politics. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, for example, in 1973, Trump's management was sued for discrimination, and Trump was named in the lawsuit. Now, when you bring this up, right? This is the 1973 lawsuit where Trump didn't want black people moving around white people. They'll say Trump's a racist. Trump hates black people. Okay. So fine, let's go with that. Let's say Trump is a racist and Trump hates black people. This happened in the 1970s. Now, that was 1973. Bring up a more recent 1970s event involving Joe Biden, in which he worked with segregationists to keep black people out of white schools. And what will they say? What will black Democrats say? They say, but people change. That was the past. How? So if Trump did it in the same decade as Joe Biden, Trump's a racist. But if Joe Biden does it, Joe Biden can change. Come on now. That doesn't even make sense. So let's go with a scenario. If Trump is trying to keep black people from moving away from or trying to keep black people from moving into white neighborhoods, that means Trump is pro-segregation. Now, if Biden is trying to keep black kids out of white schools, that means Biden is pro-segregation, meaning they had the same ideology. So how is it that one is racist and the other is not? Why does one get to change and the other does not get to change? Now, if you're going to say, well, Trump continues to say racist stuff, so that means he's not changed. Well, Joe Biden just recently said if you can't figure out whether to vote for him or Trump, you're not black. He also said a whole bunch of other stuff like black parents don't know as many words, so we need to play the record player. He said record player at night so our children can learn more words. This is stuff that Joe Biden has said recently. What was here's another one I'm going to come up to, but this right here is interesting too. Now, excuse me. And just so y'all know, sometimes I cough to clear my throat. It's easier than just going over and over again. I hate that. That annoys me. I have OCD a little bit. But anyway, so just know, if you hear me coughing sometimes, it's just to clear my throat. But let's talk about segregation for a minute. How many black people are pro-segregation? Now, I know that's not a popular question, but if you talk to black people are pro-segregation. Black people want to go to black schools, support black businesses. We want to build our own and we want to be self-sufficient. We want to do everything ourselves. We don't want to be dependent on government, especially white government. And yet when somebody starts talking about segregation, we look at them as if there's something wrong with them when most of us are segregationists at this point. Now, we weren't always that way. A lot of us, let me not even say most, a lot of us are segregationists. I agree with Trump. One of the problems in the black community is we get money and we go run toward white neighborhoods. And then we leave our neighborhoods and then white people come and say, hey, look, they think this is garbage, but let me go ahead and snatch this up at a low rate, fix it up. And they start gentrifying and they raise the values of the property and then they raise the rents. And then black people can no longer afford to live in our own neighborhoods. I'm with Trump. Keep black people out of white neighborhoods. Make us stay where we at. Build up our own neighborhoods. I'm with Biden. Keep black people out of white schools. Let us educate our own people. We don't need them teaching us our history. And that's been part of the problem in the black community. And I know that's not popular to say. I don't see them as racist for that. I don't see either one of them as racist for that. Personally, because I hold the same beliefs. I believe in segregation. I believe in separate but equal. I don't believe I don't believe we should be treated as second class citizens, but I do believe in separate but equal. That's just me. So, and I know a lot of black people believe the same way. I know a lot of Israelites believe we should be separate from the other nations. We should be doing our own thing. So how can you call Trump a racist when many of us have those same beliefs that, hey, we should be separate, but we should be equal? So let's talk about the 94 crime bill. 26 years of Democrat evil. Democrats have had 26 years to fix the effects from the crime bill. They had 8 years with Obama, 2 of which they controlled the House and the Senate. Obama could have used executive orders to fix it, and yet they did nothing. Oh, wait, let me back up. They did something. In 2015, they signed what are called blue laws. Go check the blue laws and see what the blue laws do for the police. In the midst of them killing us, when Obama was talking about Trayvon Martin could have looked like his son, Obama signing these blue laws to give police more, to make it more difficult for the police to be brought to justice when they commit crimes. This is what the Democrats do. Because the Democrats came out of that that mythological party switch era in which the racist Democrats were still there. Bill Clinton, when did he become a Democrat? When did Joe Biden become a Democrat? Come on now, they were there before that so-called party switch. So either they either they were Republicans before the party switch, or they've always been Democrats. Go check their history. So let's talk about the crime bill. And this is the reason I'm leading into something with this crime bill, because black Democrats tend to hate when you bring up this crime bill. Over 2 million black people were in prison. Let's not forget this. And let's not forget that the crime bill is still in effect. They have not gotten rid of it. It is still hurting the black community. And people will say, well, that was in 94. That was then. No, it's still hurting black people now. They didn't fix this. Then the 94 crime bill, I went over a little bit of this in the last study. They canceled Pell Grants for people in prison and ended that, decreased the number of black people graduating with degrees. It dropped from 14% to 7% at the state level and from 19% to 10% at the federal level. I remember back in the day, I used to hear about black people going to prison and they come home with degrees, college degrees, high school diplomas. You hear about people having internet access and all kind of stuff. And that was, I don't know how long ago, but I know now, I have a friend that's in prison. And he said they don't have any computer access and they don't have any college courses. They don't have any kind of classes he can take where he's at. And I just find that interesting that that's what the Democrats did. And it seems to be a systematic attack on black people. And I know a lot of black Democrats don't like to hear that. Why? Because they're not thinking for themselves. Somebody else is doing the thinking for them. So they can't process that the Democrat Party would ever do something evil. So when black people leave prison uneducated, they have a felony record, which makes it hard to get a job. They can't get federal student aid. So that means they cannot go to college, which means they can't find gainful employment in most cases. So they're working for minimum wage or barely above that. They have their voting rights stripped. So they can't vote. They can barely make enough money to get by if they don't start their own business. So they basically have to live a life of poverty or reoffend and get sent back to prison. So this is what the Democrats did with the 94 crime bill and still affecting us. They destroyed black families. It increased the fatherless home rates. And then that decreased the family income, which widened the racial wealth gap. And then in 1996, they passed welfare reform, which disqualified another 1.5 million fatherless black families from getting welfare, which drove them below the poverty line as well. So how is it that we're coons and we're agents and we're COINTELPRO and we're uneducated for not supporting Democrats? This is why I don't support the Democrat Party. One of multiple reasons I'm going to show you. So let's talk about some other hypocrisy real quick. They got you all riled up for the kids in cages. We're going to get these kids out of cages. Look at Republicans. They putting kids in cages. Democrats been putting kids in cages back to the 94 crime bill. Mandatory minimums. They intentionally wrote the laws so that the crimes that black people were more likely to commit got harsher punishments than the crimes that white people were more likely to commit, specifically concerning powder cocaine versus crack cocaine. So how is it that you guys are still supporting the Democrat Party? That's what I don't get. I don't get how many of our people will go so hard for people that hate us. And then they get you riled up about kids in cages. They got black people in cages since 1994. And now suddenly they want you to be outraged because some people who committed a crime, because crossing a border without going through the proper channels is a crime. You cannot just go to any country you want to, and show up without your passport and your whatever form of ID you're going to use. You can't just show up to that country and be like, I'm here. No, you're going to get arrested and you're going to sit in a cage. That's what's going to happen. And for some reason, people are baffled that Republicans support putting criminals in cages. Republicans always support putting criminals in cages. But here's what's baffling to me. The House passes $4.5 billion in emergency border aid. This is June 26, 2019. The Democrats led this. The Democrats will put black people in cages, but when Republicans put criminals in cages who came into our country illegally, the Democrats are like, oh, no, we got to do something about this. $4.5 billion in emergency border aid. But here's what's insulting to black people. This is from NPR.org, June 26, 2019. Here it is right here. The link to all this is going to be in the description. The House Democratic leadership pushed through a $4.5 billion emergency aid package late Tuesday to help thousands of migrants packed into overcrowded facilities at the U.S.-Mexico border, but it's unlikely to get a hearing in the Republican-controlled Senate. The measure passed by a 230 to 195 vote, mostly along party lines, with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tamping down a last-minute revolt by members of her party's Progressive Caucus who had sought, among other things, to ban private shelter contractors who failed to provide basic level of food, hygiene items, and medical care to migrants under their care. Every member of this body has a sacred moral obligation to protect human rights and the lives of vulnerable families, no matter who they are or where they came from, Pelosi said ahead of the vote. Pelosi has some nerve. Every member of this body has a sacred moral obligation to protect the human rights and lives of vulnerable families, no matter who they are, where they came from. So now, non-citizens came into this country illegally, got put into prisons, cages, jails, whatever you want to call them, and Democrats immediately passed a $4.5 billion emergency border aid for them. And yet black citizens get put into cages. We haven't seen Democrats pass a $4.5 billion nothing for us. Not anything. They don't care about human rights and vulnerable lives when it comes to black people, but non-citizens. And here's what should be the slap in the face to black Democrats. They were going to take your tax money to do it. They put your people in prison and your people are citizens. And then they take your tax money to get non-black, non-citizens out of prison. And y'all still vote for them. This is why Democrats treat black people the way they do. And this is part of my problem with the Democrats, specifically black Democrats and the Democrat Party. But this is my problem, is black Democrats allow this over and over and over again. They allow themselves to be abused. And then they claim that this time around, they're going to hold their feet to the fire. We're going to come back to that. So now, how do you know you're being manipulated? If you listen to all this and in your mind you're going, but what about Trump and Republicans? He's not saying anything about Republicans. Does that mean he thinks Trump is better? Is he a Trump supporter? Goes back to what I said in the beginning. Many black Democrats cannot fathom the idea of a black person who can talk bad about Democrats and not have to bring up anything else. Now, part of my problem with this question is, what does it matter? Like, if you go to court and you're standing there and the prosecution is saying, look, here's a list of your charges. You don't say, hey, but what about that dude over there? I know he did this, this, and that. And the prosecutor, okay, so what? You still have to answer for your charges, right? So when I'm bringing up the Democrats, it has nothing to do with Republicans. That's a deflection. It's a deflection that Democrats like to use in order to avoid talking about their party. Trump didn't force Joe Biden to work with segregationists in the 1970s. Did Trump put a gun to his head and force him to do that? No, Trump didn't make Biden do anything. Biden chose to do that. So when I bring up what Biden chose to do, why are we bringing up Trump? Why do we need to bring up Trump or Republicans? Trump didn't force Democrats to pass the 94 crime bill. So why do we need to bring up what Trump and Republicans are doing? Or why do people feel the need to say, well, both parties? No. Let's talk about one party at a time. Let's let everybody answer for what they did individually without convoluting the conversation with all the other extra side conversation. Trump didn't force Democrats to pass the 96 welfare reform to put the additional 1.5 million black families into poverty. Democrats did that because they wanted to do that. Trump didn't force Biden to make any of his recent racist comments. Trump didn't force Biden to tell you ain't black if you don't vote for him. Trump didn't force Biden to say we need to play the records so our kids can learn more, learn more words. Trump didn't force Biden to say poor kids are just as smart as white kids. Trump didn't force Biden to say we don't have as much culture as Latinos. Trump didn't have anything to do with Biden's words. That's all Biden himself. So now